My name is Jen. All righty, we got this being recorded. My name is Jennifer Greer, and I'm your host today. I want to welcome you to our sixth annual legislative review. As I said earlier, we started this in 2020 during the pandemic, and we've been doing it 6 years in a row, and we'll keep going as long as y'all will be there for us. And this is our chance to talk to leading advocacy organizations in the state via Zoom and find out what has just happened in Montgomery. I think the session is supposed to end on Thursday of this week, so it is actually still happening. We appreciate we have 8 speakers today, and we appreciate all of them being here. I want to thank our team before we get started. Shannon Haddock, who helps me lead MAD Make a Difference here in Birmingham. Shannon runs our chat. Megan Cheek handles our Zoom registration and our technology. Kristen Rezick and Michelle Adamo both help us with social media. Megan, Kristen, and Michelle are of HIVE Alabama. We invite you to follow us both on social media and sign up for the HIVE electronic newsletter through its website. And Shannon has both of those links in the chat. And we are basically women-led activist groups who are working for positive change in Alabama. As I said, we're in the final days of this session. We expected this to be a quick session as all of the lawmakers are up for re-election or up for office if they're running again in the May 19 primary and the November 5 general election. So they usually get in and out. However, this has not been a session without surprises. So we're going to go ahead and get started today. As before, each of our speakers has about 5 to 7 minutes to give us the rundown from their perspective and the perspective of their organization, and hopefully some highlights and the lowlights. So we're going to start with Elaine Burdeshaw. She has to go first today. Elaine, are you on the call?
I'm here. Hello. Can everybody hear me?
Great. I can. Take it away, Elaine. Elaine is
Wonderful.
with Alabama Appleseed.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director at Alabama Appleseed. I am currently in the State House. If you've been in here, you know that there's a weird lounge area in all the women's bathrooms. So here I sit. So our first priority for this legislative session had to do with the conditions in the prisons. We were pushing a bill, SB 316, sponsored by Republican Senator Larry Stutz from Tuscumbia, to provide independent oversight of the Department of Corrections. What ended up happening instead, which we were very excited about, was we came together with Senator Stutz, with Pro Tem Garland Gudger, with the Department of Corrections and the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts, and hammered out a oversight pilot program that is going to be led by the Department of Examiners of Public Accounts. They will be carrying out, they had several responsibilities in SB 316. They will be carrying out many of those, and we all agreed and understood that as far as kind of the monitoring and inspection side of oversight, they could already do that without having to pass legislation. And so they have begun working on that already. That will cover 3 to 4 DOC facilities. That'll be Tutwiler, the women's facility, and then 2 to 3 men's facilities, which are being selected right now. The examiners is currently working on a framework for the oversight that they're going to do. And they also intend to be reporting publicly on their process, how things are going, their findings at joint prison oversight committee meetings in the future. So you can look out for updates there on the pilot program and how it's going. So
Bravo.
we're thrilled about that.
Wow.
Mostly we were excited because we work with a lot of families who have loved ones incarcerated, and they felt really good about this step and saw it as really positive movement. So that was really validating for us. to know that if they felt good about it, then we felt good about it too. So that's where we are on the oversight front. Our second priority for this session is a bill SB 254, sponsored by Republican Senator Sam Gavan from Huntsville. And that bill is actually up first on the House calendar today. So it's made its way all the way through the process. And if it passes off the House floor today, that'll be final passage, and it will go to the governor for her signature. So things are looking okay with that bill today. Obviously, we always expect surprises, so we'll see what happens when it gets down on the floor. But that bill is around parole revocations, and it would essentially, if somebody's parole is revoked for a new charge and they're later found to be not guilty of that charge, then they're kind of expedited. Basically, they can be added back to the next parole docket faster than they are now. So that's what that bill would do in a nutshell. And again, that is up for a vote, SB 254, after they go in at 1 p.m. today. So we will see what happens there, but we're hopeful. And
Wow.
that is it. That's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Elaine, for going the extra distance to be on today. That's positive news, and that's a great way to start. And it also shows what happens when we have strong advocates like Alabama Appleseed right there in the action where the sausage making happens, and being there with the families, making positive change. That's really encouraging.
Definitely. Thanks, y'all.
Our second speaker today is Charles Miller with Alabama Rivers Alliance. Charles, are you on the call?
I am. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, as Jennifer mentioned, my name is Charles Miller. I'm the policy director at the Alabama Rivers Alliance. And honestly, this year has been a really kind of exciting and impressive year when it comes to people's engagement on issues related to the environment. We've had obviously the Public Service Commission bills that have gotten a lot of attention, but we've also had some other environmental bills that were really controversial, and we've actually, believe it or not, got a few positive ones this year as well. So I'll kind of run through all of those. Obviously, most of y'all, I think, probably are paying more attention to the legislature than the average person, but there were several attempts to reform or kind of structure the Public Service Commission, which is the body that sets our utility rates. Currently, they're all elected through statewide elections, so you get to vote on all three of the commissioners. And early on in the session, there was a proposal that would have completely removed Alabamians' ability to vote on these elected officials. They would have been appointed by the governor. And ourselves, Southern Environmental Law Center, our partners at Energy Alabama, really thought that this was a bad idea for a number of reasons. One, we don't really ever like seeing folks have the right to vote for something taken away, right? And then number two, I think it was pretty transparent that this was a result of the fact that in Georgia, two incumbent public service commissioners had lost their elections to newcomers, and these newcomers were instituting the kinds of reforms that maybe would kind of cut into Georgia Power's bottom line. They were looking at things like moratoriums on data centers throughout the state, profit caps, things of that nature. And so, obviously the parent company of both Georgia Power and Alabama Power was kind of spooked by that. And so there was an initial attempt to completely take away Alabamians' rights to vote for Public Service Commission. There was really a level of engagement that I have just never seen on an issue like this among Alabamians. And it was, truly, it was left, right, and center. It was people from all walks of life who were very upset about the potential of losing their ability to choose their public service commissioners through elections. And they kind of stood up and said, like, we're not going to take this. And it was very, very interesting to see how it all went down, because, you know, this, like many other pieces of legislation that are priorities for certain interest groups, was moving pretty quickly. And we were expecting there was going to be a floor vote on that bill, and then all of a sudden, one Friday or one Thursday, we thought it was going to be on the calendar. It got pulled from the calendar. I don't know why a bill would be pulled from a calendar unless there weren't the votes to pass it. And so, you know, I think that was a direct result of, you know, everyday Alabamians calling, emailing their representatives, and, you know, letting them know that this isn't what we want. And if you vote for this, you're going to pay a price at the ballot box in May or in November. And again, just very impressed in terms of how many people were doing this, how many people were calling, emailing their representatives. And that, to me, has kind of been the lesson of this legislative session. Is I've seen people get engaged on these issues in a way that they haven't before. And I think not only in terms of numbers, in terms of, you know, number of emails, number of phone calls, but also just in terms of kind of moving their understanding of how a lot of these issues are connected as well. So that's been a big bright spot in this session. One of the unfortunate things that we have had to deal with, though, earlier this year was a piece of legislation called SB 71. To put it as briefly as I can, this was presented as a sound science bill. It was supposedly patterned after legislation that had passed in Tennessee, as well as an executive order that President Trump had signed regarding gold standard science. Unfortunately, neither of those was true. It went much further than both of those. It became law, and it prevents our state from having any kind of environmental regulations that are stricter than the federal minimums contained in the Clean Water and Clean Air Acts. The only way you can overcome that restriction now is by showing a direct causal link between a pollutant and what they call manifest bodily harm, so injury or illness, essentially. And this is really problematic because I think we all know, in general, the federal government doesn't always regulate everything that perhaps ought to be regulated. That's the way the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act were designed. There's supposed to be room for states to step up. And this put kind of an impossible burden of proof on Alabama's regulators to step up in these circumstances, because, you know, and this is kind of what we had a hard time getting legislators to understand in some cases. When you require a direct causal link, that is the equivalent of asking which cigarette gave you cancer, right? You know, you can't say, this is why I got lung cancer. Exposure to this is why I got, you know, this chronic illness. It's all risk-based. And so none of it has a direct causal link. And so we worked really hard on that piece of legislation, but because of, I think, some other kind of outside political things that were going on, we were not able to either stop that or get it amended. I do think we really did put up one of the best fights we've put up in a long time. And again, I think there were some other kind of pieces on the chessboard that were moving around us that made it not possible for us to get what we wanted out of that piece of legislation. But again, I think we saw an incredible level of engagement. The Senate sponsor got called out on the Senate floor about who was behind this legislation. And again, like, seeing people make these connections, draw, you know, the lines between the dots and start to see the bigger picture of who's influencing state politics and why, I think is something that's going to continue to bear fruit for not just us, but like all of the groups on this call moving forward. And so that's very heartening to me to see that. I've got a couple of other ones I'd like to flag that were nice and positive. One is
2 more minutes,
yes.
Charles. Okay.
The Alabama Seagrass Restoration Task Force has been established to remediate seagrass loss in state marine waters, so mostly Mobile Bay. That's really important because seagrass is kind of an indicator of not only how healthy our bay is, but also how healthy our rivers are that deliver water down there to the bay. We did see some good pieces of legislation on data center regulation. One is HB 403, and both of these are engrossed, so they're just awaiting the governor's signature. But HB 403 would make sure that any kind of new costs associated with a data center and their electric utilities are paid by the data center developer, not by regular consumers. Another one, HB 399, brought our tax abatements for data centers in line with our tax abatements for all kinds of other industrial development. And so that was positive. And I will end with saying that I touched on kind of the big Public Service Commission reform efforts earlier. There were some good pieces of legislation. Unfortunately, one of them, HB 475, got kind of twisted towards the end of the session, as things often do when we reach the tail end of the session. And so it's kind of now more of a mixed bag. It didn't do away with electing public service commissioners, but it did create this Secretary of Energy position who's going to get to dictate what the Public Service Commission can look at, what goes on their agenda. But on the flip side, now we're going to have formal kind of rate cases for the first time in my lifetime in Alabama. So they're going to have to at least publicly justify why they charge the electrical rates that they do, the power company, Alabama Power. And so all of this is kind of, still evolving. But again, the big takeaway for me was we saw people get engaged in a way and at a depth that I had not seen before. And that really gives me a lot of hope for the future.
Thank you, Charles. I mean, this is amazing. I was feeling a little low before we started this session, and the first two reports have been positive, or at least the ability to see a positive take on these in terms of the engagement of families and lawmakers with the Elaine's progress and of just the citizenry coming out on the issues that Charles has talked about. So this is great. Next up is Jennifer Harris with Alabama Arise. Jennifer, are you on the call?
I am.
Great.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jennifer Harris with Alabama Arise. I'm the Senior Health Policy Advocate there. And I'm going to be dropping some links into the chat about the things I'm going to mention. This year in the legislature, there was not a lot of movement in the health equity bills that came up. There were a few bills that were passed in the House. I know it's pending where it is in the Senate in relation to midwives and scope of practice. And we did make some gains. The Alabama Family Planning Act was filed by Maryland Lands about 2 weeks ago. But we're going to keep our eyes on that for 2027 because we want to make sure that people have the right to contraceptions when it comes to family planning, when it comes to maintaining health. That is really important for reproductive health justice and maternal health as well. So we will be looking forward to seeing how those bills are able to move next year. And then when it comes to some health equity bills, there were a few screening bills. One bill that successfully passed was a prostate screening bill that will allow for insurance to cover more individuals, especially those who are at risk of prostate cancer. There were some bills for breast reconstructive surgery after a cancer diagnosis and the cost of that reproductive surgery being covered by insurance. That bill has stalled, unfortunately, but there were also some other screening bills as well that have stalled. And then I know a lot of people are familiar with Cover Alabama that is housed at Alabama Rise. We are still continuing our work on ensuring that Alabamians have affordable healthcare insurance options. So when I drop that link, I will also have a link to Cover Alabama so that you can be involved there with some of the work that is going on, as well as other bills of interest that we typically follow or we want our members to know about. Some wins that we had was continuing universal meals that provides free breakfast for Alabama students and summer EBT. So both of these measures were maintained in the budget, so more children will be fed over the summer and at school at no cost to families, as this is covered in our state budget. There is also legislation that is pending as a part of a package legislation that will pause the remaining 2% state tax on food for May and June. Um, this is something that Alabama Rise was successfully to cut that state budget in half from 4% to 2%. So we are still monitoring and we will still continue our efforts for there to be a permanent 2% cut solution. If this measure did pass, it will only be for May and June. It would simply pause that tax for those 2 months. And as we talk about our state budgets at Rise, we are monitoring our upcoming state budgets for 2027. We know that some changes that will come from HR 1, also known as the Big Beautiful Bill, will create cost shift um, sharing to the states from the federal government. This change is on track to create about a $250 million deficit in our state budget. We are not sure where those funds will be coming from, how we will be able to make that up, or what changes the SNAP program may have to make. And so we will be following that and be looking at those efforts to see how we can minimize that devastating impact. And then also we are looking at the Education Trust Fund budget as well, because the cap from the Choose Act in 2027 will be removed. And so what that means is that there will be more families that will be able to use funds from the state and take those funds from public education for homeschooling and private education. And while we do understand there is a balance of family needs there, we also want to make sure that our public schools have adequate funds for students in public school as well. And with that removal of the cap, that is going to have a larger hold in the Education Trust Fund budget. So as we are looking at these issues, I do want to bring it to your attention, and I will put that link in the chat as well. The brand new, fresh off the presses, Alabama Tax and Budget Handbook for 2026. So if you're interested in seeing how these budgets work, how they impact the policy work that we do, and how we can make sure that our representatives are accountable when they are passing budgets and looking at the cost of programs throughout our state, I would encourage you to check out that resource. So I'm going to drop those in the chat now, and that is the wrap up I have from Alabama Arrives.
Jennifer, thank you. Your video, your visual kind of moved in and out. I'm not sure what was happening, so I apologize to you on that. I'm not able to see you right now. I did briefly see you, but thank you for that. I know that HB1, the One Big Beautiful Bill, is an unfolding story. We're hearing a lot in the news about the continuing cuts to Medicaid and hospital closures. We may need to come back to you and maybe a special Zoom that looks at the Medicaid and the hospital and the healthcare situation in Alabama before next year. So we'll be in touch on that. We appreciate all that you and Alabama Rise does to keep us in the loop. And thank you for the positive news too. Thank heavens that the kids are going to get to eat this year. I was surprised that was even up for a vote. I'm surprised that wasn't a no-brainer for the lawmakers.
We'll take the wins where we can get them as we continue to the work to get more wins.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have work to do for sure. Thank you. Next up is Kim Bailey with the League of Women Voters of Alabama. Kim, are you on? There you are. Thank you.
I am.
Yeah, Kim, you on the call? Well, thank you. I know you're in Montgomery, bird dogging a bill, and so we're thrilled to have you.
Yes, thank
Can
you.
you
Sorry,
bring us up
yes,
to
I'm
date?
in my car. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yes, so I was here because HB 541, which is the bill that would close Alabama's primaries, it passed the House, so it was before the Senate's State Governmental Affairs Committee this morning for a hearing. They did a public hearing. And unfortunately, it did pass out with a favorable report. So it will be going to the Senate for a vote, which would be the final vote before it becomes law. There was some discussion from the committee members, one in particular from St. Clair County, who said he has heard from a lot of his constituents that they are against this bill. For some reason, he still voted for it. So I would encourage all of you to immediately contact your senators and ask them to not vote for this bill. It is a bad bill. Alabama does not need closed primaries. It will only disenfranchise additional voters. And it was really interesting because the people who were opposed to the bill really ran the spectrum of types of people. So it is not a popular bill. So again, contact your senators and try to get this stopped before it passes and is signed into law. So that is the breaking news right now. The other thing I want to talk about is HB 486, which I'm sure probably everyone on this call has heard about now. It is the Alabama Voting Rights Act, which received a public hearing last week and the House Judiciary Committee. And that bill is carried by Representative Elaine Clark. And it actually received a favorable report out. So that was a huge win for us. It was very exciting. It probably won't get up for a vote, but it might. There's still a couple days left. But it gives us hope for the future that maybe we will be able to push this farther along during the next session. So we were very, very excited that it actually got on a committee agenda, that it had a hearing, and that they gave it a favorable report. So that was just so exciting for everyone who was involved in that effort.
What was the number on that bill, Kim?
It is HB 486 is the Alabama Voting Rights. Yes. Yep. And so if that bill passes, the other voting bills that were introduced, they didn't go anywhere. They stayed in committee, but they were in a different committee. For some reason, the Voting Rights Act was the Judiciary Committee. And so they did have a meeting. The Constitutional and Campaign, I can't remember, CC&E Committee usually gets the voting bills, and they don't meet that often, and they don't put it on the agenda. So, but if the Voting Rights Act passes, we don't need any other voting bills. So we're hopeful for the future. Marilyn Lands, Representative Lands, she introduced HB 14, which was the citizen referendum bill, and that also did not go anywhere. So we are hoping that will get reintroduced in the next session, and we can push on that one as well. The other thing I'll just point out to kind of follow up on the citizens being engaged more this session is we have noticed that the Alabama Channel usage is up considerably. And so we take that to mean that a lot of people are interested in going to see what is being said and what their legislators are doing during the election season. So we think that's great that all of the citizens are involved. So, and that's really So we really had two main things and one win. So I'd say, we're doing pretty well this year.
Right. More good news, and then a call to action on HB 541, the one that
Yes.
would close primary.
Was that 541? I had somebody in the chat asking. So
Yes,
HB
HB
541.
541, and it is to call your senators because it is now before the Senate, even though it's a House bill. Yes.
Great. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
All righty. Next up is Stephanie Butler, and Stephanie has been monitoring religion in Alabama schools. And this is an issue that has been a growing concern for many of us, and it seemed to peak this year. So, Stephanie, can you bring us up to date? What's happening with this push to bring more religion in our public schools?
Yeah, thanks for having me with y'all today. I'll start by saying the Ten Commandments bill is not going anywhere this session, but I'm sorry to say that I don't have good news on the rest. Released to religious instruction, Senate Bill 248. It did pass and is ready for the governor's signature. So I'm going to start with talking about why that bill is so problematic. It mandates that all local school boards allow a parent to choose for their child to be allowed to leave campus during the school day for religious instruction. Now, this was sold as preserving local school boards' local control of whether or not to offer this program, but it absolutely does not. The bill was rewritten mid-session to clearly say that if even one parent, just one, requests the program, the district must create a policy to allow it. This model legislation comes from a bunch of really nasty organizations, Alliance Defending Freedom and First Liberty. These are both Christian legal advocacy organizations. Alliance Defending Freedom has worked for decades to change laws to fit an explicitly conservative Christian worldview, and they target things like abortion and transgender rights. So that's the world that this stuff is coming from. And the bill was pushed nationally and in Alabama specifically by an organization called LifeWise, which I know for sure is already active in Alabama. They are already offering these programs in some local school districts, which tells you that this program is already authorized and allowed in school districts because LifeWise is already operating. What this law does is require school districts to offer it. LifeWise has affiliated with the lobbying organization, the Center for Christian Values. They helped craft school choice laws and some anti-trans bills in Ohio. And they're also affiliated with the Heritage Foundation and the Family Research Council, which I'm sure you've heard of. They're two of the most powerful right-wing think tanks in the country. This LifeWise program has already proven to be disruptive in other communities. Somebody shared some interesting information with me about Westerville, Ohio, and the program ran there for 2 years before being removed. The school board president there in Westerville talked about repeated disruptions to the school day. And look, I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to know that pulling kids out of class, putting them on buses, sending them off campus, bringing them back to campus, unloading the bus, and sending the kids back to class, this is disruptive. And a lot of people made this point in committee hearings, but the legislators just dismissed these concerns. The school board president in Westerville also questioned why these programs insist on taking place during the school hours instead of before or after school when they might actually support working families. This was another point that was brought up in the Alabama legislature, totally ignored. But in Westerville, this program was so disruptive that parents got together and formed a group called Westerville Parents United Against RTRI, and they got the program removed from their school system. I will get back to that because there's going to be some to-dos for you. 2 other bills, though, that were up this session and could very well still pass, even with just a couple days left, is HB 511, which is school prayer, and House Bill 8, which is chaplains in schools. They only need a vote in the Senate to be sent to the governor. Just one more step. So if you haven't been acting yet, call your senator today about HB 511 and HB 8. The chaplains bill, HB 8, has two big problems. One is that it contains no minimum professional training requirement, meaning that anyone can volunteer. I mean, really, anyone can be a chaplain in your child's school, according to this legislation. And number two, it does not restrict chaplains from interacting with students. Now, this is concerning because the legislators pushing the bill say that chaplains are for teachers only. They insist that that is what they intend, but they've also described the chaplains as a free alternative to guidance counselors. So if chaplains aren't really meant for your kids, the legislation should say so, but they refuse to make that change. That's concerning. So who is behind this chaplains bill? Many of this bill's sponsors' talking points come from an organization called the National School Chaplains Association. The parent company for that organization is Mission Generation, and before Mission Generation cleaned up their website to appear less extreme, they really proudly stated on the front that they use a proven strategy to share Jesus with children worldwide, which is lovely, but not in a public school setting. I don't think I need to go into great detail about what's wrong with mandatory daily prayer in schools. This one is being put forward as a constitutional amendment, which means that even if it should pass the legislature, it has one more hurdle, and that's the voters. Typically, this type of red meat gets put on the ballot to bring out a certain type of voter when they're worried about low voter turnout in an upcoming election. So make of that what you will. I'm going to get back to release to religious instruction. Just the fact that this one bill has already passed means that all of you need to start advocating at your local school board immediately before they set the specific policy in your school district. And they will be doing that over the summer. I can guarantee that there's already a Mom for Liberty in your community with an email just ready to click send, demanding LifeWise in your school district before the ink even dries on the governor's signature. And you need to be just as prepared. And to be clear, I'm not just talking to parents of public school students. If you are a taxpayer or just a member of the community, what happens in our schools is your business too. So when we're done here, in addition to all the other actions you're going to get today, make sure you find out who your local school board members are, who your superintendent is, who your principals are. You need to look up their contact information because you're going to need it. It is absolutely imperative that you work in coalition to make this local advocacy successful. So I encourage you to find the minority religionist groups in your community, the LGBTQ advocates, atheist and free thought groups, and honestly, parents who just want schools to be for learning and not culture wars. I'm going to be working in the next few weeks with local and national partners to develop opportunities for anyone to learn how to effectively advocate at the local level so that our schools can stay a safe place for learning for all of our kids. So if you want to learn more, if you want to get involved at the local level, I'm going to, there you go, that's my email is in the chat, sfbutler33@gmail.com. We'd love to have you as part of the team. You're gonna need to be in your own local community. This is going to be a statewide effort.
Stephanie, and thank you for your personal leadership on this. I remember 2 or 3 years ago when Moms for Liberty were so active in Florida and creating such a disruption down there. And I remember thinking how fortunate we were that we didn't have that disruption here in Alabama. And here it is.
It's coming.
Yeah, it's right here. So we're on it, and we're glad you're on it. Next up is Krysti Shallenberger with Read Freely Alabama. Krysti, can you bring us up to date on what's happening with in libraries and First Amendments and everything on your plate?
Absolutely. But first, I want to make a couple of quick comments. First, shout out to Daniel Tate to Energy Alabama, who worked hard and created the infrastructure to oppose the PSC bill. I know a lot of people were surprised by the turnout, but that did not come out with a lot of work, and I work with Daniel Tate pretty closely. So I just wanted to make sure he got his due. Read Freely Alabama. Read Freely Alabama, SB 26, which is the anti-library board bill, has passed the House, passed or has passed the Senate, passed a House committee, and all that is needed for it to be sent off to the governor is a House floor vote. We were unable so far to get an amendment to for just cause removal for the library board bill requirements. Right now, it just requires a pretty significant majority to remove a library board member. The sponsor in the Senate, Chris Elliott, has pushed this bill multiple years. We've killed it every single time. This is the farthest it's gone. He presented it as a simple governance bill, just in case a library board member was derelict in his duties. However, in comments made by media, he said it was explicitly to remove and restrict books that he doesn't like, which we've seen in our library board bills. Library board, uh, which we have seen target LGBTQ, trans, and racial justice literature in the children's sections. And that fight is ongoing at the Alabama Public Library Service, which has passed an amendment to restrict anything depicting transgender folks and sexually explicit material using those vague terms, and that will likely go into effect in October. So be prepared for us to communicate on that front, as well as with SB 26. In larger part, I do want to address, Stephanie, some of the stuff you've spoken to, we've already dealt with in terms of Moms for Liberty being active in our communities. I do want to say there is only one really active Moms for Liberty specific chapter, and that is in Madison County, whose chapter leader, Emily Jones, is currently running for State Education Board, seat 8, so you might want to be aware of that. The one in Baldwin County, is defunct. However, it has been taken over by Fair Hope Faith Collective, led by the former Moms for Liberty chapter, Rebecca Watson, who will likely be active there. Our wonderful chapter leader, who is commenting right now in Fair Hope, Elizabeth Williams, would be a great one for people to connect with if you are concerned on that front. I think a lot of this will be these bills will be interconnected in how they impact our local board situation. So that is the update that I have from Read Freely, Alabama, in regards to SB 26 and the Alabama Public Library Service Board.
Thank you, Krysti. We appreciate you all being in the fight. You're an amazing organization. Paula Wilson with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense Alabama. We worked on some postcards for you, Paula, so I know you've got there were some positive bills that you were pushing. Can you give us your update?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. And MAD and HIVE, thank you very much for the invitation to share with you about what happened to gun safety bills in this year's session. As Jennifer said, my name is Dr. Paula Wilson. I am a volunteer for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I am the current leader of our chapter. This year, our volunteers worked on 4 gun safety bills. We had some hopes of building on some very significant progress we made last year when we improved our gun law strength ranking from 34th in the nation up to 28th. And although several bills have been filed this year, it's probably no surprise, being an election year, that things are not moving. But I will give you a summary of what we did work on. So one bill we supported is House Bill 316, which is a form of a child access prevention bill. These are also known as CAP laws. You may know gun violence is the leading cause of death of children in Alabama. This bill would work on that problem, and the bill is related to the presence of guns at public schools. Parents must securely store guns, and they can be charged with a Class A misdemeanor if a child accesses the firearm and brings it to a public school. While the bill doesn't specify exactly how a firearm is stored, it notes that reasonably secure firearms may be locked with a trigger lock or stored in a lockbox or a gun safe. The bill has not gotten any committee action, and it is sponsored by 11 representatives and brought up by Representative Barbara Drummond. And she has brought this bill up for several years now. The second bill we support is Senate Bill 192. Under existing law, an individual seeking compensation from the Alabama Crime Victims Compensation Commission must file a claim within 1 year of the injury or death upon which the claim is based. This bill would provide that an individual seeking compensation may file within 2 years. And the extra time is really needed. The grief and trauma caused by these events make it, many people have a hard time filing within 1 year. The bill has been reported out of committee, but has been pending action by the entire Senate for some time now. Our third bill was Senate Bill 267, which would change our license to carry law. This bill would convert the current concealed carry license to a general carry license that would be required for any carry of a pistol in a vehicle or on a person, although there are some exceptions, such as carrying in your private business or on your own property. This bill, again, has not received any committee action. The fourth bill we supported is Senate Bill 156, which is a type of law known as Extreme Risk Protection Order law. This bill would allow certain parties, including family members and law enforcement officers, to petition a court to temporarily remove firearms from the possession of a person that the court determines to be an immediate danger to themselves or to others. And again, it did not receive committee action. A bill that did make some progress is one we did not work on. It is House Bill 420. This bill would increase the penalty for discharging a firearm into an occupied school bus or a building from a Class B felony to a Class A felony. It has passed the first chamber and is on the calendar for the second chamber. So it has not been surprising that there has not been movement on gun safety legislation this year. It's an election year, and I was told before the session started that controversial gun safety legislation would probably not get much consideration. In response, Moms Demand Action conducted a postcard writing campaign, as Jennifer said. We want to let our lawmakers know we supported them working on these bills. And we had a great response. And as people requested, we sent out materials and information to write 500 postcards. We had over 16 events that our volunteers hosted around the state. We had big events of over 20 people, and we had very small events in rural areas such as Cherokee County. There was interest in all 4 bills. Most people wrote their lawmakers about all of them. So although we have not been able to enact new gun safety laws this year, we do feel we succeeded in notifying our lawmakers that their constituents support such action now and in the future. And then finally, I'm going to post in the chat a newsletter about our work in partnership with Representative Jeremy Gray. Elected officials, community organizations, and residents are partnering with him on East Alabama Conflict Resolution and Violence Prevention Initiative. And you can read about the progress we are making in our newsletter. And so that's my report. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Paula. Great report, and another good report that talks about our involvement in our citizen activism. I'm hoping we can build on that next year, and convince those lawmakers that gun sense is common sense, and we could use more of it in Montgomery.
Yeah.
So, thank you. Our last speaker today is Marva Douglas with Action Coalition for Transit Alabama. Marva is one of the most dogged and dedicated activists I know, and I've been thinking of you. I recently got my car tag notice, and I was reminded of how much it cost me to run a car, to operate a vehicle, and in part why public transportation is so important. Can you bring us up to date on where we are on public transit?
Well, I'll be happy to share with you what my thoughts are. It's time for a change, and I wrote it down so I wouldn't miss anything. And here's why. In 1952, the Alabama legislature passed Amendment 93, putting all gasoline tax dollars into bridges and highways only, a law that's still in effect today. None of those dollars go toward building streets, roads, or sidewalks, even though we need them. In 2018, the legislature passed the Alabama Public Transportation Trust Bill, but they've not been able to find a funding source for it. In both the 2024 and 2025 legislative sessions, public transit funding bills were proposed, but not passed out of their committees. They each proposed collecting a $5 fee on car tags and used to fund public transportation, but neither bill got out of committee. In this legislative session, as far as I know, no bill for funding public transportation is even proposed. I want you to think on this. Students statewide ride yellow buses to school, but during the summer or when they graduate from high school, no buses are available for them to attend local colleges, look for summer jobs, or volunteer in their communities. Local bus service would give students transportation access to do volunteer service, which would give them access to top scholarships and membership in the National Honor Society. Robust public transportation throughout communities would give students access to local colleges, museums, and even jobs. Everyone cannot afford automobiles, but everyone needs transportation for access to a good life. Remember, the minimum wage in Alabama is still $7.25 an hour, and in some cities, like Birmingham, buses run once an hour on some routes and every 90 minutes on others. Almost monthly, we read stories monthly about someone being killed while walking on our streets. And elderly folks must drive among people who no longer honor stop signs or speed limits in order to get to and fro. This kind of transportation limits access to a decent life. We must get the attention of the legislators. They control all activities in this state. I'd like to suggest that we all visit the Action Coalition for Transit website at alabamaact.org. Go to its resources section. There you'll find information to use to educate others on how public transportation can enhance the lives of all folks statewide. Information you find there will encourage you to contact your legislators, encourage others to do the same, talk to groups on organizations about the savings we'd all net using public transit, because $4 for everyone, we net $4 for every $1 we spend. Another thing to do is call your favorite talk show and have discussion on the value of robust bus service to all citizens, including car owners. And number 5, make signs and share petitions about funding public transit. Number 6, remind religious congregations that robust public transit helps them grow by giving folks without cars access to their services. Number 7, remind your legislators that transit is a boon for all. Number 8, while you're at the ACT website, sign on to help build an army of citizens statewide who want robust public transportation. And the last thing I'd like to suggest is that you share the website with everyone you know. It's time for a change. The website is alabamaact.org, and let's visit it for change. We must educate folks statewide so that by the time the next legislative session starts, we will at least have people educated enough to know that they can have a better life with good public transportation.
You, Marva, you always make the best case. The best case. I wish you were in Montgomery. I wish we had you as my lawmaker. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the compliment. But
yeah.
Next month I will be 87 years old, and my brain does not work as well as it used to.
Well,
I would not do anything.
I think you would give them a run for their money. Thank you so much. We've had a special request. We've got 5 minutes left, and Tian Lindell from Birmingham Indivisible just wanted 2 minutes with us. So, Tian, are you on the call?
I am, and I'm setting my timer so I don't go over that 2 minutes.
And tell us how you pronounce your name. I may have butchered it.
It's Tyann. I did not realize that Rebecca was not going to be here today. So I just want to thank all of you for the work you do. Birmingham Indivisible has daily action emails that go out, generally about contacting federal officials. But we, during the Alabama legislative session, we do have once a week, we do dedicate that to Alabama State House items. And we have a committee of 3, and Rebecca Rothman sends out that weekly email. I would like to, when we get together in January again on our HIVE Zoom, I would like to make contacts with more of you directly so we can get mostly quotes from you or blurbs from you on why these bills are important that we can send out to our members. And we keep a good tab on what's going on, but we want to know from you what we should be sending out to our membership.
Great, and we do record these calls, and so that would give you an option to perhaps get some of those quotes as well. But thank you, and thank you and Rebecca and your whole team for the calling effort that you did this year. Okay, well, I think we're gonna wrap it up today, unless there are any questions. I want to thank everybody in particular. I want to thank our speakers for being here today and taking the time to educate us, and for your organizations and all that you do. And thank the team again. And thank you, everybody on the call, for being here and staying engaged. This is a tough time to be engaged in activism with the global situation and a national situation, very concerning. And so for us to be able to focus on our state legislature and also focus on our own communities is really important, that we don't lose sight of that focus and get discouraged in our commitment. So as we always say, we have work to do. We have work to do in the movement. I think adelante, Megan Cheek says in Spanish for let's move forward. Let's move forward. So adelante on to the spring primary in May 19, and let's hope we can all do our best to elect good and progressive leadership in Alabama that will help us on all of these issues in 2027. Thank you.